Okay, this is the lecture for Module 2 for macroeconomics. Remember, if you have any questions, write them on the back of the paper. Alright. Now, in this module, we're going to talk about what a business cycle is and why policymakers seek to diminish the severity of business cycles. We're going to talk about how employment and unemployment are measured and how they change over the business cycle. We're going to discuss the definition of aggregate output and how it changes over the business cycle, the meaning of inflation and why price stability is preferred, how economic growth determines a country's standard of living, and why models, which are simplified representations of reality, play a crucial role in economics. Now, the business cycle is the short-run alternation between economic downturns and economic upturns. A depression is a very deep and prolonged downturn. Recessions are periods of economic downturns when output and employment are falling. Expansions, sometimes called recoveries, are periods of economic upturns when output and employment are rising. So that's output and employment are rising. The point at which the economy turns from expansion to recession is a business cycle peak. The point at which the economy turns from a recession to an expansion is the business cycle trough. All right, now if we take a look at this graph here, we can see that we have the unemployment rate on the y-axis, we've got the years on the x-axis, and the orange line shows us the unemployment rate for each year. Now we can see that if I tell you that the shaded parts here are periods of recession, all right, you'll notice that the unemployment rate goes up when we are in a recession, and sometimes after a recession. But when we are in periods of expansion, the unemployment rate drops. All right. Now, this is an example of a model in economics. Basically, we're able to put a lot of information and data into a simple graph rather than having you read it. All right. So that's one of the main reasons why economists use graphs a lot, because it can show what is going on rather than say have to write out an entire report and have people read it, because that would be even more boring. All right. Now, employment, unemployment, and the business cycle. Employment is the total number of people currently working for pay. Unemployment is the total number of people who are actively looking for work but aren't currently employed. The labor force is the sum of employment and unemployment. The unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. Now, it is possible, and in fact, very likely, that there's someone in your family or someone you know that is not in the labor force, right, who's an adult. So, for example, if you are not seeking employment and don't have a job, you're not counted as being unemployed. All right. So if you know anyone who's retired or a stay-at-home parent, right, they don't count as being unemployed because they're not actively seeking work. Okay. To be unemployed in a part of the labor force, you have to be looking for jobs. All right. Now, defining recessions and expansions. In many countries, economists adopt the rule that a recession is a period of at least 6 months or 2 quarters during which aggregate output falls. Sometimes that's too strict. As we saw in the previous graph, the unemployment rate would continue to rise even when we were technically no longer in a recession. So it is kind of limited in its usefulness for us in economics. But it just kind of gives us that official definition there. All right, aggregate output in the business cycle. During a recession, the quantity of goods and services declines. To measure the rise and fall of an economy's output, we look at aggregate output. Aggregate output is the economy's total production of goods and services for a given time period. Aggregate output normally falls during a recession and rises during an expansion. Now, inflation, deflation, and price stability. A rising aggregate price level is inflation. Basically, things are getting more expensive. A falling aggregate price level is deflation. The opposite, things are getting cheaper over time. Now, the inflation rate is the annual percent change in the aggregate price level. The economy has price stability when the aggregate price level is changing very slowly. We currently have price stability here in the United States, but there are countries around the world that do not have price stability. Economic growth. Now, Americans have become able to afford many more material goods over time thanks to long-run economic growth. Economic growth is an increase in the maximum possible output of an economy. All right, basically being able to produce more stuff cheaper in the same amount of time using your resources. All right. Now, if you think about it, we are able to produce and make more stuff here in the United States than we were 100 years ago. All right. And as we see from this graph here, real GDP per capita, meaning per person, has increased over the long term. Since 1900 all the way to 2013, we've seen a massive increase in real GDP per capita. Now, this brings us to talking about models in economics. Now, a model is a simplified representation of a real situation that is used to better understand real life situations. Sorry about that. Basically, what you're trying to do, many economists will create a real but simplified economy. So, for example, cigarettes in World War II prison camps is an example of a simplified economy. And then what they will do is they will look at how different economic things played out in there. We'll talk more about this when we talk about types of money at a later module. But many economists nowadays will also simulate an economy on a computer, especially when you're talking about tax models or money models. Anytime things get really complicated, having computers do those computations can allow economists to try many different things without having to do all sorts of crazy math by hand. Now, the other things equal assumption means that all other relevant factors remain unchanged. All right. Now, there's a term that you need to know for that. All right. And all other things equal. All right. We're going to write that as ceteris paribus. All right, this is a key word that you need to know in economics. It will probably be a multiple choice question, all right, on either the Unit 1 exam or on the AP exam. All right, so the term ceteris paribus means all other things equal. All right, now, the reason why that's important to understand in economics is because if we don't hold everything equal and change one thing, then it allows us to go down this rabbit hole of many different factors changing. All right, we want to hold everything constant and then, all right, change one thing and analyze how that one thing can impact the economy as a whole. All right, so that's why the concept of ceteris paribus is very, very important. Okay, now on your notes, you are told to draw a business cycle graph. All right, so I'm going to draw that for you right here. Now, on the x-axis, we have time. All right, mostly that's going to be written out in years. All right, and on the x-axis, we're gonna, or on the y-axis, I'm sorry, we're gonna have gross domestic product. All right, now the way that the business cycle graph looks is usually something like that. Oh, I guess it disappeared there. Hold on, let me try that again. There we go. Okay, now here we have our period of expansion. This right here would be our peak. Right there is going to be our recession. This right here is going to be the trough. And finally, when the economy grows again, we are back to expansion. All right. So, hopefully that makes sense to you. Like I said, if you have any questions, please write them down on the back of this paper. There's the summary page for you, so we have it. And I will see you tomorrow in class.